Hello and welcome to another episode of the DVD Graveyard. Tonight we're going to be taking a look at Subspecies from 1991, directed by Ted Nicolau. And this is a movie that I've kind of been wanting to talk about for a little while. I just watched it last night, which, if I sound a little groggy, forgive me. I woke up at like 1 this morning for no other reason, and I just couldn't go back to sleep. So I came to my living room and had a little Subspecies marathon. So it really made me think. I was like, this is a really good time of year to talk about these movies, because they're definitely they're not Halloween movies, but I think they fit well with the time. And I kind of had a good time this morning. Like I said, even though I was kind of a little tired and groggy after it was all said and done, but I had a good time watching all these movies. If you're not familiar with these movies, or I guess I should say this movie, I'll get more into the sequels later, but if you're not familiar with this movie, this is a full moon feature. Like I said, it was released in 1991. I think I've talked about one other full moon film before. I talked about Demonic Toys, I know, here a while back, which is one of my favorites. But this is another one of my favorites. And unlike Demonic Toys, this is not one that I really grew up with, but I know it's one that a lot of people grew up with. And it is, the full moon, quintessential full moon zombie. I'm sorry, not zombie, vampire. I told you I'm a little groggy. Vampire flick. Or I guess I should even say series with a little bit of a twist on it. So, like I said, this was directed. It was, I believe, written and directed by Ted Nicolau, who he directed a couple other films for Full Moon, during the Full Moon era. And this is when Full Moon was really, in its heyday. This was one that you definitely would have seen on the video shelves a lot. And I'm really bummed, because like I said, I grew up loving Full Moon. I love Puppet Master, Demonic Toys, Bad Channels, Castle Freak, Netherworld. There's so many films that I love from Full Moon, and this is one that escaped me for a long, long time, and I was really glad to find it when I did, because it's just such a good time. I mean, it's a little cheesy. The first time I saw it, I was like, it took some time to kind of grow on me, unlike some of the other ones that I just fall in love with immediately. I didn't love it the first time I saw it, but my second viewing, I just fell in love with it, because I do like a good vampire movie, but it just, I don't know, this one was just really different. And even this one in particular, like I said, there's several sequels, which I'll touch on later. This one is very different from all the rest of the sequels. And I don't know if I would say that this is really my favorite one. Maybe I'll do like a ranking of all of them at some point. But I do find myself going back to this first one, and it just is so different than all the rest of the ones that came after. And like I said, it's kind of, well, not kind of low budget, it's very low budget, but you wouldn't really know that, because this is I think it's the first American film that was shot in Romania, and so they didn't really have to do much set dressing or anything like that, because the culture and just the landscape over there really leans into this whole vampire mythology, and it just works perfectly. You get the old castle ruins, the old creepy forests. It's just a fantastic setting for this movie. The music is great. There's just so much going on in this movie. The lead vampire, played by Anders Hove, Radu Vladislav, is so cool. Again, this one being so low budget, it gets better as it goes on, throughout the sequels. But he just looks so cool, very Nosferatu inspired kind of look. And I hear that comparison brought up, and I mean, he doesn't really look exactly like Nosferatu, but he does have the kind of gray skin, the really long fingernails, or not fingernails, just long fingers, his fingers are super long. And it's just a really cool look for the vampire. And like I said, at first, I didn't really care for Radu too much. But watching it again and again and again, like after I fell in love with it, it really kind of just grew on me, and I love it. Now I love Radu, and these are some of my favorite full moon films and some of the best full moon films in my personal opinion. And that's another thing, so I was going to say, if you're not a big full moon fan, because sometimes their movies can be kind of goofy and silly, and this one does kind of have its moments effects wise, but it is played very seriously, and I applaud that, because all the actors in this movie do a damn good job. I mean, they're not the greatest, but everything is done really well in this film. I really enjoy the story. So, if you're not just a diehard full moon fan, you might even give this one a chance if you're a vampire fan. And if you do end up liking it, then, that's good news, because there's a lot of material to dig into, because this did spawn several sequels. I'll touch more on that later. We will cover that in good time. So, like I said, this movie was produced by Charles Band, the great Charles Band, who likes, he puts his name on everything. And of course, he did fund this movie, and Full Moon was his company, but it was written, and I think it was his idea, because Charles Band loves little tiny creatures, and but the script and the main story of this was written by Ted Nicolau, if I'm not mistaken. So, like I said, this movie stars Anders Hove, who plays Radu, who does a great job, and we open this movie with none other than Angus Scrimm of Phantasm. He played the tall man in Phantasm, and that's probably where most of the budget went, to be honest with you. No, I'm just kidding. But and he does a fantastic job in this small role that he has, and he plays King Vladislav, which is Radu's father. Radu comes home. He's been banished into exile for a long time, very long time, and basically Radu comes back to his father's castle to claim this relic known as the Bloodstone. And what that is in the folklore, essentially, these people gave the vampire family this bloodstone, which drips the blood of saints, and that is basically to satiate them, so they will not feed on the villagers. They won't feed on the people that are living around them. And peace is essentially made. And King Vladislav is a vampire, but he's not a bad vampire. He respects the truce, and basically Radu has come back because he said that this is his birthright, because he is the firstborn son of King Vladislav, and he thinks he deserves the Bloodstone. But Angus Scrimm, King Vladislav, tells him that the Bloodstone is too powerful, because Radu, he still kind of holds these feelings of contempt, and he's not a good vampire. He's an evil vampire, and you really see that whenever you see him, because he's grotesque, and his skin is gray, and he's got these wicked fangs. Got the really long fingers. Again, very reminiscent of Nosferatu. And he's such a cool looking vampire, and he talks, the way he talks kind of cracks me up sometimes, because he's always, Bloodstone is my birthright, father. So that's kind of how he talks through all these movies, and it's kind of funny, kind of ridiculous, but at the same time, it kind of grew on me after a while. But basically, he wants this bloodstone. The father will not give it to him, so he locks him in this cage that drops from the ceiling, which Radu, I guess didn't see, or it was placed in the perfect spot, or something like that. And King Vladislav says that he's going to give the bloodstone to his brother, Radu's brother, Stefan, because Stefan is supposed to be coming into town. And this is where the subspecies come into play. And that's another thing about this movie, is they have the most to do in this film. Unlike a lot of the other films, the subspecies is kind of just the title of the later films. They don't have much to do with the rest of them. But basically, while Radu is locked in this cage, he starts to break off the tips of his fingers, and they hit the ground, and they start to kind of bubble and boil and transform into these little miniature demon monster looking things that look really cool. And they are stop motion, and they look really good. The stop motion is done by David Allen, who did stop motion for Puppet Master and Stuart Gordon's Dolls. Great stop motion effects. I mean, David Allen is a master at stop motion. And these little creatures, they go and release Radu from the cage while Vladislav is just kind of watching, I guess, and not trying to stop them or stomp on them or anything. And he releases Radu from the cage, and Radu kills King Vladislav and takes the Bloodstone. And that kind of kicks us into the main plot. We get the main titles, and that's kind of what's going on. Is we get Radu now has the Bloodstone, which is not good for anyone. I also want to say I apologize if you hear my dogs making noise in the background. They're sitting in here with me, keeping me company, but they're a little goofy sometimes. Anyway, after the main titles, we kind of meet our protagonists, who, it's these two American girls, which are Michelle, played by Laura Tate, and Lillian, played by Michelle McBride. They arrive in Romania, and they kind of link up with their friend, played by Irina Movila, named Mara. And they are basically there to kind of study Romanian culture, I guess for a class or something like that. And so they check into this old hotel, or it's actually an old fort, but I mean, I guess it's converted into not a hotel, more like I don't really want to say hostel, but it's basically this place for them to stay. I guess it kind of is like a hostel, sort of, kind of. I've never been to a hostel, so I can't say, but anyway, they're staying in this place that used to be this old fort. And the guy who's kind of running the place kind of gives them a little rundown on the history and tells them about Castle Vladislav. And so the girls kind of go out to explore. They go, and another thing is they ask if there's anyone else staying there, and he says that there is one other person who is staying there, who is studying zoology, is what he's there for. And they wind up meeting him, and this is where we meet Stefan, who is played by Michael Watson. So Stefan is just this, handsome young guy, very unassuming, at this time. We don't really think anything of him. And he basically tells them, you probably won't see much of me because I'm going to be in and out of this place, because I study nocturnal animals, essentially, is what he does, is what he says he does. So Michelle is just like enamored with him. She thinks he's the sexiest man alive, I guess. And so anyway, he kind of just leaves them. The girls go out and they're exploring, and they go check out Castle Vladislav, which is this beautiful old, just kind of these old castle ruins. I don't know the name of the place exactly off the top of my head, but it's gorgeous. All of the castles and things like that in this movie are real castles, real ruins. So again, that's really saved them a lot on the budget, and it works so well for this movie. Everything is just is gorgeous. I mean, it just looks great. So anyway, they go to the to Castle Vladislav, and they're checking it out. And the girl who is native, Mara, I think she's actually from there. She tells them, everybody knows of Castle Vladislav, but nobody really talks about it. Nobody really, brings it up. It's kind of, they're hush hush about it. And so Lillian wants to go inside the castle. So she tries to open this door that's kind of like half broke off the hinges. And she reaches in and she kind of scratches her arm on this, on something inside. And after that, it's starting to kind of get dark. So they decide to leave, and right after that, Radu answers the door. He doesn't answer the door, but he comes to the door and opens the door, and he sees them. And that's where he's just kind of like, oh, ladies or whatever. So the next day, they go around and they're interviewing all these people around in the community, kind of asking about Castle Vladislav. They're not really getting any answers. There's a lot of kind of they kind of get the history on the Vladislav's culture. That's where they kind of, I think they bring up the stuff about the Bloodstone and the pact that was made. and all this good stuff, but nobody's really been inside of Castle Vladislav. It's just been kind of abandoned. So while the girls are kind of doing their thing, they end up, I guess, getting really sleepy, and they just pass out on this hillside. And at this point, Lillian is starting to kind of get sick. They're saying from her cut on her arm. So she passes out, and they all end up falling asleep on this gorgeous hillside, and right down the hill, there's this old kind of ruin that goes off into the forest. And again, it's just so pretty. Everything is in this movie is gorgeous. I just want to be in this place. I would love to visit. It's beautiful. Like I said, I mean, they could not have chosen a better place. But yeah, just a beautiful place for them to be. And essentially, they wake up, and it's about to, night is about to fall. So they're like, shit, we got to get back to our place, to the fortress. And so they get up and they take a shortcut through the woods. Mara tells them there's a shortcut through the woods, and they go through there, and it starts getting dark, and they realize that they're being followed. And we kind of see Radu sort of watching them from the shadows, and he's kind of lurking around in the forest. Really creepy. Like I said, the Radu is such a cool looking vampire, and he's so spooky. If you ran into him, he'd scare the shit out of me if I ran into him. So creepy. And so while they're in the forest, they run into Stefan. And Stefan takes them back to the fortress. And when they get back, Lillian ends up, she goes to bed. And Stefan is kind of talking to the other girls. And he goes to check on Lillian. And while Lillian has been in there asleep, Radu has snuck in through her window and has been basically feeding on her. He's been sucking the blood from her arm. And he's just about to bite her on the neck and, I guess, drain her down. And Stefan bursts through the door, and Radu flees. And it's this really cool shot we get of him receding in the shadows. Like, they play a lot with shadows in these movies, but it's a really cool shot where you just kind of see him backing out, just in shadow. You see his little creepy claw hands kind of dip out the window. It's really cool. Very simple effect. A lot of the stuff in this movie is very simply done, but it works really well for what's going on in this. It just works really good. I like it a lot. Anyway, Radu leaves, and Stefan pursues him. And when he meets back up with Radu at his castle, Radu has the bloodstone, and he's going back in, and he's kind of taunting Stefan, because Stefan is a vampire as well, and the sun is starting to rise. And he's, Stefan, is this what you're looking for? This is my birthright. They say that quite a bit. And he basically, Stefan is kind of starting to get weak because the sun is coming out. And he's like, you've made it too far from your crypt to make it back. That's what you get for pretending to be human. It's a really cool line of dialogue. I really like that scene, whenever they kind of confront each other. And then the guy who owns the fortress, he comes up to rescue Stefan, and he takes him back to the fortress, just in time before he, I guess, dies in the sunlight or whatever have you. So after that, Lillian just starts to get sicker and sicker. She's not feeling any better. There's a doctor that comes to check on Lillian, and he basically says that she has like blood poisoning, and asks her if she's anemic and that she's lost a bunch of blood, and very reminiscent of Dracula. And she tells him, go on, I'll be fine. We have to do this for our research. So they go to this festival, and we get some more kind of lore, some Transylvanian, Romanian lore, about vampires and stuff. And that's where Michelle bumps into Stefan. And that's where we kind of get the hint that Stefan is really kind of falling in love with Michelle, and they smooch. But unbeknownst to them, Radu is also there, and he's watching this. So that's where he learns that Stefan is falling in love with Michelle, which, kind of makes Radu, interested in Michelle, because he basically just wants to take everything away from Stefan. That's kind of his whole goal, is just to fuck his brother over in any way that he can. So Radu ends up killing this like gypsy woman that's there, that kind of gives them some lore, or kind of dumps some lore on them, and he kidnaps Mara, the girl who is native to this region that they came to see. He kidnaps her, and he takes her away. Shortly after that, they go back to the fortress, and that's where we find out that Lillian has died of this blood poisoning. But Stefan and Michelle and all of them, they the other guy who owns the who kind of runs the fortress hostel place, I think his name is Carl, if I'm not mistaken. They know what's going on, so they decide to take Lillian's body and bury her outside the castle ruins, because if not, the body will be mutilated. That's just kind of part of the folklore, is that anytime to protect against vampires, they'll stake the body and they will decapitate it and all this other stuff. So they don't want that to happen, so they take her and they bury her. And Stefan goes off to hunt down Radu, and Carl and Michelle, they end up going back to, they go to this church to hide, to kind of hide out from Radu, because in the lore in this, vampires cannot enter consecrated ground unless they're invited. Carl and Michelle are basically just kind of waiting for Stefan to get back. Well, Stefan goes to Castle Vladislaus, and he finds Mara, and she's chained up in this castle, and unbeknownst to him, Radu has left the subspecies to guard Mara and make sure she doesn't get away. And the subspecies just kind of throw a net on him and capture him with a net, which I think is really funny. It's just a plain ass net, but I don't know. I've never been netted, so I can't say how difficult it is to get out of it. I think it wouldn't be too hard if you're a really old, powerful vampire, but I don't know. Anyway, Stefan is captured. Lillian wakes up. She rises from the grave, and she lures Michelle out of this church, and she kidnaps Michelle, and she takes her back to Castle Vladislaus and chains her up alongside Mara. Well, Michelle manages to, she breaks out. She breaks the chains out, and she frees Mara, who then Mara also becomes a vampire and turns on Michelle and attacks her. And I'm sorry, I'm forgetting a really important part. Carl, the guy who owns the little fortress hostel thing, he busts through the door with like a shotgun and these wooden stakes and everything, and he's gonna fuck them up. Like, he's ready to kick some vampire ass. And there was a scene that we got earlier in the movie that I thought was really cool, where he's loading up a shotgun, but Stefan's like, guns are no use. Guns are not gonna have any effect on Radu. But he's putting rosary beads inside the shotgun shells, which is really fucking cool, because like I remember there's one sequel to John Carpenter's Vampires, where they just put like wood inside of shotgun shells, which I thought was really cool. And of course, sometimes there's silver bullets and things like that. But I thought this was a really neat concept, was to put rosary beads inside the shotgun shells, and that is what's going to kill the vampires. So he busts in, he frees Stefan. Right before Radu is about to desecrate Michelle in front of Stefan, because Radu is really wanting to just mutilate Michelle, in front of Stefan, because he loves her. And Carl shoots, I can't remember if he shoots Mara or Lillian, but he shoots one of them first. They die. Michelle gets free, Stefan gets free, and they kind of have this showdown. I believe Michelle ends up killing, again, Lillian or Mara. I can't remember which one, but she kills one of the vampire girls with a falling chandelier. It like collapses on them. And Stefan and Radu have this sword fight. Oh yes, I also forgot to mention Carl is killed. Like I said, I'm sorry, I'm groggy. It's been a long day. I'm tired. I apologize. Carl is killed, unfortunately, and his stake. He's got this big, long wooden stick that falls into the fire. And Stefan and Radu are fighting, with swords, and Radu basically kind of gets the upper hand on Stefan, and Stefan is about done for. He's laying on the ground, and Radu is about to kill him, and Stefan sees the big wooden stake, and he pulls it out of the fire and stabs Radu through the heart, and Radu starts to puke up blood, and just start to die, and he falls to the ground. Stefan picks up the sword, and he chops Radu's head off, which looks actually really damn good. It's one of the more convincing effects in this movie. I was surprised it looked as good as it did, to be honest with you, for the budget that they were working with, and kind of some of the other effects, because some of the other effects are not great. Like I said, like Radu's hands, he's got the long fingers, and sometimes they look kind of silly. Like this was a good example of like when they're doing the sword fight. Radu's long fingers are kind of bending, like he can't really grab things very well. Like whenever he holds stuff in the movie, sometimes you'll see the prosthetic fingers kind of bend and stuff, which it doesn't really bother me too much. I mainly think it's funny, but at the same time, if stuff like that bothers you, then it's gonna bother you. Oh yeah, shit. Sorry, I missed something else. While Michelle was tied up, yes, Stefan has decapitated Radu, and Radu is dead. But while Michelle was tied up on this slab earlier, Radu had bitten Michelle and she is going to become a vampire. He wanted to make her his consort. You're my fledgling, my consort. He says that quite a bit, in especially these next couple of movies. And Michelle does not want to be, she doesn't want to be like Radu. So she requests to Stefan. She's like, make me like you, Stefan. There's no other hope for me. So he bites her, turning her fully into a vampire. The sun is starting to rise outside of the castle walls, and Stefan takes the bloodstone away from Radu's dead body. He and Michelle, they go to lay down in a coffin, and they close the lids, and they go to sleep for the night, since they're both vampires now. And, of course, Michelle's not fully converted just quite yet, but I guess she's sleepy because it's been a long night, which is understandable. But just as we think it's over, we see Radu's severed head, laying on the floor, and in come the subspecies, which I should have mentioned this earlier. The subspecies, again, looks super, super cool. Again, effects done by David Allen. Looks so damn good. A lot of the footage, I think actually maybe all of the footage of the subspecies is actually reused through the rest of these films when they show up. And as the subspecies are coming over to Radu's body, he opens his eyes, and we roll credits, implying that Radu will return, and we have not seen the last of the subspecies and Radu. So yeah, that is Subspecies from 1991. Like I said, directed by Ted Nicolau. This is such a fun movie. I can't recommend it enough. If you're not, into, I guess overall, if you're not into just low budget, full moon type films, you may not be crazy about this, but it is definitely a different full moon movie. Like I said, it's a little bit more serious, and it's not as goofy as a lot of them. I don't know. That's just kind of my opinion. That's the way I see it after viewing it multiple times. Because, like I said, this is a newer one for me, that I've just learned about in the past few years. And like I said, when I first watched it, I wasn't crazy about it. Whereas, like a lot of the other ones I grew up with, like, again, Demonic Toys, Puppet Master, things like that. I grew up watching those. So those are a lot more, those are more for nostalgia. They're not the best movies out there, but they're very nostalgic for me. Whereas I don't really have that with these movies, but I feel like, in another 10, 20 years, I'm going to be nostalgic about these because I found them at a really good time in my life, like I said, within the past couple of years, and I just fell in love with them. The first time I saw the first one, again, I wasn't super crazy about it, but watching it again and then watching the sequels, I fell in love with them. And I love them. So on the flip side of that, if you love full moon movies, if you're already a fan of full moon and this is stuff that you grew up with, or maybe you grew up renting this as it is in the video store, you will love this. This is a great film. And if you love vampires, it's a really fun take on the vampire lore. Sure, it is a little cheesy sometimes, and the effects are quite dated, and they don't hold up as well. But still, it's a good movie, good time. I can't recommend it enough. So anyway, like I said earlier, I was going to talk about this. There are several sequels to this. I think the first one was in like 93, so just like 2 years after this first one, all the way up to 2023, just a couple of years ago, the fifth installment came out. So the sequel, Bloodstone Subspecies 2, again, released in 1993, picks up directly where the first Subspecies leaves off, which I always love when films do that. I love picking up directly where the first one leaves off. I'm not going to give too much away because we're going to talk about that another time because I really want to cover as many of these as I can. Then in 1994, so just a year later after Subspecies 2, we got Bloodlust Subspecies 3, which again is another direct continuation to Subspecies 2, which honestly, that one, those two kind of feel like a Puppet Master 4 and 5 situation where it's like, I think they were supposed to be one long movie, but they just had too much information, so they broke it up into two movies, because that's really the vibe I get from 2 and 3. And they came out so close together. I feel like they were a full-length film, but they just chopped it in half because it just continues very well. And like I said, that was the case with Puppet Master 4 and 5. After Subspecies 3 came the first spin-off, which is Vampire Journals from 1997. That one, so honestly, you don't really have to see that one necessarily. It mainly just has a couple characters and a few lore items, I guess you could say, that kind of tie it to Subspecies. But either way, it's a good time. I do recommend that one. Then the next year in 1998 came Bloodstorm, Subspecies 4. Yes, they're all blood something, by the way. There's Bloodstone, Bloodlust, Bloodstorm. And then, of course, in 2023 came Blood Rise Subspecies 5, which the fifth one came out, which actually acts as a prequel. And honestly, I didn't expect much out of it, but it ended up being pretty damn good. I enjoyed it for what it was. There's a lot of retconning going on with the series, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. We'll get there. But yeah, they're all enjoyable. The budget of these movies just gets better and better as they go on. Each movie is just a little bit better than the last. So, but again, I always find myself coming back to this first movie. Also, supposedly, I think there is two. So the films Decadent Evil 1 and 2, I haven't seen them in a really long time, but supposedly those films are connected to Subspecies somehow. I don't know how, but that's what from my understanding. That's what I get. Like I said, I don't know how. Maybe I'll watch those and maybe I'll review those because I'd like to cover all of these, or at least the first three. But again, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Another thing I'll say about these is, again, if you want to give them a watch, they're fairly short. I think each of them are only like an hour and a half, if not just a few minutes shy of an hour and a half. All of them are on Tubi. I'm not sure if Blood Rise is. I have them all on DVD and Blu-ray, but I think they're all on Tubi, and I'm sure they're all on Full Moon what is it, Full Moon Express, or whatever a Full Moon streaming service is called. I don't have it. I've thought about getting it, but I haven't. And if you get the chance, definitely. Oh shit! I dropped it. These aren't like super hard to come by on physical media, but if you're a physical media guy like I am, definitely pick these up. There is a big. I want this box set so bad, but I mean I've already got them all individually, but. There's a badass coffin box set, shaped like a coffin that contains all the films. Or again, if you get the chance to pick them up individually, that's how I have them. I have the 20th anniversary edition Blu-ray of the first Subspecies. Very good. It's got the Video Zone on it, which again, the Video Zone, if you're not familiar, is just the kind of behind the scenes stuff that Charles Band always added, after the film was over. So anyway, I'll stop rambling. Until next time, like I said, I'd like to cover the next Subspecies film next, but we'll see how that goes. I will cover them all at some point because, like I said, this series is very near and dear to me. So anyway, until next time, have a great day and goodbye.